Hi there, I'm Sabine.
And I'm Sivani.
And this is the legacy edition of Behind the Byline. To celebrate 100,000 Hidden Compass readers, we have republished 10 of our stories from over the years across our departments and around the globe in a legacy issue. And you might have noticed that there are two of us today, which means that one of us wrote the story we're going to discuss.
Who could it be?
It's going to be Sivani Babu, the co-founder of Hidden Compass. Welcome, Siv.
I'm happy to be here. I didn't have much of a choice, but I'm always happy to be here.
And we're glad you're here. So for those who don't know, Sivani is, as well as a co-founder of Hidden Compass, she is an award-winning photographer and writer, fun fact. And for the legacy issue, we were able to publish one of the stories that each of us has written for Hidden Compass. We don't often write for Hidden Compass, but occasionally we do. And Sivani got to write Ice Bear. For those who haven't read it or seen the incredible photography, Ice Bear was published as a photo feature in our Human and Nature department in our autumn 2018 issue. And in the story, Sivani brings us to the beautiful and desolate ice floes of the Arctic, where she wants to hug and better understand a certain apex predator. So, Sivani, everything from 2018 is kind of a blur for me at this point. So please remind me, how did this story happen?
Yeah. So the apex predator we're talking about is a polar bear. And who doesn't want to hug a polar bear, at least in theory, not in reality? But this story started on a beach in Norway in the summer at about 1 a.m. So I was with a friend. We were on a photo trip and we were photographing sunset. And after that, I was supposed to be traveling on, and he was going to lead a workshop in Norway, in Svalbard, to photograph polar bears. And we were there photographing the beach. We were about 24 hours or 48 hours from scattering, and there was a cancellation on his trip, and he asked if I wanted to take the spot. And the answer was yes.
Of course.
However, I had not prepared for a wildlife trip. And so this wasn't a story that I was on assignment for. This wasn't a story I even knew I would have the opportunity to tell. I had no idea what this was going to be. And it came out of that. And then, this was 2018. So we were about a year into the existence of Hidden Compass. You and I were both still freelancing all over the world. And so this was a time when we weren't assigning stories out for the following year the way we are now. And we had a last minute opening in one of our departments, in one of our issues. And so I ended up thinking about it. It had been quite a little bit of time since I'd taken this trip, but I was sitting on these images. And while I was taking the trip, I knew there was a story there, but I hadn't really figured out what the story was going to be. And I put this together in about a week. This was a frantic week of you and I going back and forth, but that's where this story originated.
No wonder it's a blur.
Yes.
So fast. And was so incredible, the experience and of course the story that came out of it. You have been here as we've gone through all the pieces we've published in the history of Hidden Compass and tried to narrow it down to 10. And it was challenging. I have all kinds of answers to this question myself for why this story made it in, but why don't you take a shot at explaining how it got into the legacy issue?
Well, I think that's all part of how it came to be also, which is, I was photographing polar bears. I knew there was a story there, but polar bears are not exactly a topic that no one else is talking about. And climate change and the Arctic and sea ice and all of that. And so I knew if I was ever going to write a story about these images and this experience, that it would have to be a story that was very different from everything that was out there. And I don't know if you remember, but about a year before we published this story, there was a viral video of an emaciated polar bear. And it became sort of the poster child, the poster bear for the effects of climate change. And it bothered me so much at that time. And it still does, not because I don't believe that climate change is happening, not because I don't believe that it's affecting polar bears, but because of the way people drew a conclusion about the entire species from a single bear that we didn't know anything about besides this video we'd seen. We saw a bear that was clearly not healthy, but we didn't really know why it wasn't unhealthy. Right?
Yeah.
Could it be starving because it's losing habitat? Absolutely. Could it also be sick? Could it be old? Could it be all sorts of things? Yes. And it bothered me so much that we jumped to the conclusion and let it be this image of what climate change is doing to these animals. And part of what I love about this story is that instead of sort of beating on the drum of one side or the other of what is a very contentious debate, it leans into the uncertainty and the reality that we just don't know what's happening. And we know more now than we did in 2018, but we still don't know a lot because polar bears are very mysterious. They are difficult to study. They live in a habitat that is very difficult for people to get into. They are mysterious, and we just don't know enough. And so that's what this story was about telling the tale of a single bear and a species that really leaned into uncertainty and the discomfort of that uncertainty, because humans don't really do well when they don't know what's happening. And this was an opportunity for us to tell a story that got at some of the things that you and I are both passionate about, which is sort of the nuanced and realistic understanding of the science and what we do know and what we don't know. And it was also a chance to poke at people and make them a little uncomfortable. And I can't deny that I enjoy that.
Well, I love stories like this that lean into discomfort and uncertainty and are a good example of how the world is a lot more complicated than we want to make it sometimes. You know, you talked about there being one side and another side, and it's rarely just that there are only two sides of something. It's an entire universe of complexity and layers and nuance, as you said. And so it was a joy to work with you on this piece and see you get to explore all those different angles. We published this piece in 2018. As you mentioned, it was just a year after we founded Hidden Compass, which is kind of crazy to me.
Yeah.
So how does this piece resonate with you now?
This is a piece I come back to. I'm still incredibly proud of it. It won some awards and all of those things are great. But what I'm really proud of is that it made people uncomfortable and made people think. And we saw that in the response to this piece, where we had both people who were, the polar bears are going to be extinct and they're not doing fine, and the people who were like, they're totally fine, and here's this study from the fur trade industry that proves it. We had both of those people kind of coming out of the woodwork. And those are the stories I like to tell, the stories that are a bit challenging and that bring nuance to a topic that people want to see as black and white. And I appreciate that this was a place where I could do that. It's not a story that I think I would have really been able to tell at another publication, and certainly not in the way we told it and the way that we laid out the images that went with it, right? It is at times a bit of a graphic story. I mean, not to spoil it for anyone, but we lead the story with an image of a dead polar bear. And that's not a way I think I could have told this story elsewhere. And so it resonates with me now, not just about the story itself, but what it said about Hidden Compass, that we were willing to publish a story like this, and what it says for all of those writers and, you know, future contributors when they think about stories that make people uncomfortable, are not the mainstream view one way or the other of an issue, that are nuanced and that are sometimes both dark and hopeful, and that blend of things that we just don't always get elsewhere.
I love the combination of dark and hopeful. It's such a beautiful one. And it's amazing to talk about this now and to think about it in the context of how we were really still establishing ourselves as a publication in 2018. And every issue that we published was a message to the world about who we are and the kinds of stories that we like to run. So thank you for reminding me of that, and everyone watching. We are relaunching the patronage campaigns of all of the stories in our legacy issue, including this one. And because it's written by a Hidden Compass co-founder, that means that 100% of the proceeds of the campaign are going to go straight back to Hidden Compass so that we can continue to establish ourselves as the weird and nuanced and dark and hopeful publication that we are. So if you are excited about any or all of that, please contribute and check out the story, revisit the story all these years later. If you saw it when it first came out, it's really wonderful. And Siv, thank you for joining me today. And thanks for being a co-founder of Hidden Compass.
I am always happy to join you and so glad that this is what you and I get to do for a living.
I know, me too. And thank you to everyone who allows us to do that. So
Absolutely.
You're all wonderful. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.